This is day 1 of hitchhiking from Southampton to South Africa. Day 8, day 16,
day 23,
day 26,
day 35. We're going to Africa!
I was lucky enough to follow Timo's journey from the very beginning. He even gave me a few advice to cross the sea from Spain to Morocco. And as he hitchhiked all the way to South Africa, you can be sure that he has plenty of anecdotes and tips to share. So, when he went back to Europe, I invited him to exchange about his adventure.
I'm Timo from the Netherlands, 26 years old, and I've been traveling the world on and off since 2018.
Wow. So we're recording in 2025, so it means 7 years traveling.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's been pretty crazy.
And
it's been a good life.
Yeah, for sure. And I was curious about your background with traveling and hitchhiking. Did you always have this idea in mind to go traveling, or did it happen at some point in your life? How was it, your first contact with this idea?
The idea has always been there, yeah. Ever since I was in high school somewhere, I was watching YouTube videos of other people traveling, and I was like, I want to do this too. And that's another thing I find really cool now. Like, I watched these people online, saw them, they inspired me. And now I'm getting messages from people saying, hey, you've done the same for me. So I think that's pretty cool. So I've always wanted to travel. It's always been there. And then the second I finished high school, I took one gap year to travel. And then that kind of escalated.
Wow.
But then at first, the hitchhiking didn't start straight away. So I first just went to Southeast Asia for half a year, Australia for a couple of years. And it wasn't until Japan in April 2023 that, I had done bits of hitchhiking here and there.
Yeah.
But then once I got to Japan, that's when, obviously it's quite an expensive country to travel. So I figured, let's try to just hitchhike everywhere.
Okay.
And then it ended up being the 5 most amazing weeks ever. Mainly due to the fact that Japanese people are just so incredibly kind. So then after Japan, I flew to Mexico, and I was like, oh, let's just see if it works here too. And next thing you know, it's like half a year later, and I just hitchhiked all through Mexico and Central America and Colombia. And then I just kept going from there.
Okay, yeah, that escalated quickly, that's for sure. So I feel like hitchhiking had always been you have always been familiar with hitchhiking, and you did your first trips a bit like this, and then bigger and bigger trips. And when did you, I would have so many questions to ask you about Japan. Actually, I don't think I ever met someone who hitchhiked that much in Japan. Maybe we can talk a bit more about this later. But so you went then to Central America, and after that, was it straight away your big trip about going from Southampton to South Africa?
So after Central America and Colombia, I went to Australia. This was October 2023, because a friend of mine was getting married. So I went back there for the wedding. Then after that, I went to Nepal. Did like a couple of weeks of hiking through the Nepalese mountains, which was beautiful. And then it was December 2023, and I was on the phone with my mom. And she really missed me. And at this point, I hadn't been home in more than 2 years.
Yeah.
And then I decided to very spontaneously go home for Christmas. So I came home December 20th. And then December 30th, I left again. I went to England. And then I was in England for a few weeks. And I wanted to travel to Africa. And I opened a map and I saw Southampton, and I was like, Southampton, South Africa? That sounds funny enough.
Oh yeah.
And then, yeah, I looked into, seeing if it's even possible. And turns out there's plenty of people that drive it.
Hmm.
So, you can get information about all the visas and all the border crossings and everything.
Hmm.
So then I figured if they can drive it, surely I can hitchhike it.
So you kind of impulsively decided to go on this journey.
Yes, very much so.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So how was the first day of this adventure? Like, or maybe the few preparing days, if you had any.
So
How did
the first day,
this trip start?
the, the first day was actually really nice because I was meant to meet up with a friend of mine in England, Laura, but she's not really good on the phone, so she usually takes like, a couple of days to respond. And basically, I was in London and I was about to go to Southampton to start this trip, and she hadn't replied yet, and then she finally did. Um, but then it turned out, at that point when she replied, I was like, "Oh, it's too late now. I'm about to start." But then it turned out she actually lived like 100 kilometers down the road from Southampton. So she was
Okay.
actually my first ride. She came over to pick me up, and I
Okay.
spent like 2 nights with her, which was nice. And we met back in 2018 working on a banana farm in Australia.
Okay.
But we hadn't seen each other for like 5 years at that point. So it was cool to, catch up again.
Meet. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. But then, yeah, hitchhiking through England was pretty easy. I mean, it was probably one of the countries where you had to wait the longest, but I didn't need to cover that much distance in England. I just
Yeah.
needed to go from Southampton to Dover. Um, but then getting a ride to France was, yeah, a bit of a nightmare.
Okay.
So basically, what happened was or me by myself, I got to Dover late at night. Then the next day, I wanted to find a car going onto the ferry because you pay for every car that goes onto the ferry,
Mm.
but it
Yeah.
doesn't matter how many passengers are inside the car.
Okay. Yeah.
So I just needed to find somebody that could take me. But it was pouring down with rain, and yeah, nobody really seemed too keen on taking me. And after
Okay.
like 5 hours, I was just absolutely drenched. And I kind of gave up, to be honest. I went inside the ferry terminal and I was looking at, buying a ticket for the next day because it would be slightly cheaper than today. And as I was doing that, this guy walks over to me and he just asked me to borrow my phone charger. And he mentions, "Oh, my charger, is in my car still." And then I just handed it to him without even thinking. And then I realized his charger is in his car. He's in the ferry terminal.
Mm.
He must have a car. He must be, going on the ferry. So I start talking to him. The guy's named Marco from Romania. And Marco tells me, "Oh yeah, we're driving all the way to Hanover to Germany, and we can take you with us. That's fine." Um, so I'm like, "Sweet, perfect. When can we leave?" And he goes, "Oh, I don't know. We don't have a car." So it turned out what happened was they bought a car in London, wanting to take it to Germany where they live. Um, but when they bought the car in London, they figured that, for the short period of time they would be in the UK, they wouldn't need to get insurance,
Okay.
which obviously isn't the case. So the second they arrived in the harbor, somebody's like some camera scanned their license plates. It straight away flags up as an uninsured vehicle. So the police rocks up and they confiscated their car. So I then spent like hours and hours with these guys trying to get insurance sorted and get their car back and everything.
Okay.
But then eventually, we did it. And yeah, we went onto the ferry. They had some salami in their car, which they shared with me on the boat. And they drove me all the way up to Belgium where I wanted to go after.
Okay. That's uh that's amazing. So you spent a lot of so much time waiting in the harbor and you have this so unique situation. This is why we love hitchhiking. It's all
Yeah.
the stars getting in line. And
Yeah.
so after, I mean, you went to Belgium, then you went to France, and then you went to Spain. I mean, I would have some quick questions. First, how was your experience in France as a foreigner? Because as a native, I'm thinking that it works extremely fine. But if you do you
Yeah.
speak French, by the way?
No.
No. So if you
Um,
don't speak French, how is it to hitchhike in France?
it's pretty good to be honest. Yeah. France, like everybody understands the concept. Everybody,
Hmm.
knows what you're doing. Nobody's trying to bring you to a bus station or anything. Everybody knows where to drop you off, like drop you off at a good spot. And yeah, everybody's friendly. Whereas Spain, everybody seems to think that it's illegal to hitchhike in Spain,
Hmm.
which it isn't. But try convincing some 70-year-old grumpy man that doesn't speak a word of English that he's wrong. So yeah, sometimes in Spain, people will drive past and they literally just yell something at you like, "I'm going to call the police," and you're like, "Well, you can, but they're not going to do anything." Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, France definitely easy. Spain definitely. I think Spain is probably the most difficult country to hitchhike
Among
through.
all the countries you did,
Yeah,
considering your worldwide experience, Spain is still the hardest. Well,
yeah,
yeah, I will do a big tutorial about Spain because this is a subject. This is a big subject. This is for me too. It's one of the worst. I mean, it's Greece was also hard, but yeah, Spain nightmare. And
yeah,
so I think that it's in Spain that you met your travel partner Courtney, right?
yeah. So
I think it's quite important moment.
yeah, it was one of my first days hitchhiking in Spain. I just went from Barcelona and I
Yeah.
only made it about like 100 kilometers to this place called Tarragona in a whole day.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, and I checked into this hostel, and the first guy I met was this guy, Adam. He was from France on his
Okay.
bicycle on his way to
Okay.
Morocco. So that was cool. But
Impressive.
then um, the other person I met was this Canadian girl, Courtney. And she was telling me about, her trip. She initially flew to England in December 2023 for a 3-week hiking trip. Then she extended that and she wanted to go down to Portugal. And that's when I met her in,
Mhm.
what was it? Must have been March. Um, and she was on her way to Portugal. And then I was like, well, I'm going to South Africa. And then she was like, what do you mean? I was like, oh, yeah, I'm hitchhiking to South Africa. But, she was already hitchhiking by herself as well. So she
Yeah.
agreed to hitchhike together the next day.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, which, again, for me, Spain was, yeah, definitely the hardest country. But having her there probably made it a lot easier still. I think without her, it would have been even harder.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, then we traveled together down to Morocco, and then I managed to convince her to come all the way.
That's beautiful. And quick
Yeah,
question before we switch to Africa. It's more
yeah,
about
yeah.
hitchhiking techniques. Do you mostly use thumb and signs, so more passive strategy, or do you mostly go to petrol stations and try to talk with people, or do you do a mix of two?
It depends where I am, to be honest.
Yeah.
Um, like most places in Africa, you don't need a sign or anything. You
Yeah.
just stand on the side of the road, put up your thumb. The only reason I'd approach people at petrol stations is, if there's like a big junction up ahead or something. And
Hmm.
then it is also true that it is a lot harder for people to say no if you approach them.
They can
So
say it still.
asking is usually, a better way because
Hmm.
you can just smile and talk to them first. But then, if you don't speak the language, it makes it a lot harder.
Yeah.
So then I usually just stand on the like on ramp to the highway and just
Hmm.
put up your thumb and smile. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, because I noticed I'm mostly into this active strategy, And in Spain, I mean, as I noticed that it was a nightmare, I only relied on my Spanish skills and always went to petrol stations. So it's even in, so you crossed Spain only with the thumb, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
Like,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, that's impressive because I feel like yeah, it could last for years to do it. And
I
so
mean, yeah,
you,
that's the thing in Spain as well. Like a lot of times when, people would stop for us, we would ask them like, "Oh, where are you from?" And a lot of times it would be like, "Oh, I'm from Honduras. I'm from El Salvador. I'm from Germany."
okay,
Um,
tourists,
yeah, like so many times. Either, people from like Latin America that live in Spain now,
yeah,
or tourists from like France or Germany or
mm,
wherever. Um,
okay, yeah.
I'd say probably more than half the time it wasn't Spanish people.
Okay, that's interesting. Really
Yeah.
interesting. And so you made your way to Gibraltar and Algeciras,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
then you succeeded to hitchhike the boat. So yeah,
Yeah.
because I mean, I remember I asked you, I think I was there just 1 month after you, and I really followed your advice, but I had no success. And after that, I
Oh,
even
damn.
tried to ask all the boat company if I could get on the boat for free, but they were like, "Hey, no, don't." So if you want to
Oh.
share a successful story, now is your moment. How to
Yeah, so
hitchhike the
basically,
boat?
yeah, so we got to the harbor, and when you get to the harbor, we like read online that you just need to walk in and you get to like an area where it feels like you're not supposed to be, but apparently that's the right spot. And then it tells you, where to go to get to this one spot where all the trucks are waiting to get to the ferry. So we went there and we started asking all these truck drivers, and they pretty much all told us no. And they said that ever since COVID, they're not allowed to take people anymore because they need to write down how many people are in the truck now beforehand and this and that. Um, and then we found a bright yellow van with a German guy named Moritz inside. And Moritz wasn't supposed to be in the trucker's lane, but he was just lost. And he was
Okay.
like, "Oh yeah, I can try." So we got in his van and we made it past the first few checkpoints without any problems. And we thought we made it. Like we thought, we were waiting to get on board the ferry. We thought we had gone past all the checkpoints. But then it turned out there was one more. And yeah, they told us no. Um, which is really sad. And then we had to get back out. Moritz, as kind as he's, even offered to, pay for our tickets, and we were like, "No, that's fine. We'll find something else." So we went back out, went back to the trucker stop, and then after a while, Courtney was like, "Screw it, I'm gonna ask the lady that's checking the tickets of the trucks, ask if she can help us out."
Okay.
So she asked the lady, and the lady basically said to her, "I can't help you find a ride, but if you find a truck that's willing to take you, I'll pretend like I don't see you." Um,
Okay.
and then after that, we managed to, go up to the trucks and we could tell them like, "Oh, you can take us. The ticket office won't mind." And within a few minutes, we managed to find a guy that was willing to take us. And then him and the truck behind him, who was his friend, they were both going to Morocco. So I got in one truck, Courtney got in the other. They drove us
Okay.
onto the ferry. And then on the ferry, because it was Ramadan, they weren't allowed to eat, but they still got like a food voucher. So they even gave us their food vouchers so we could eat on the
Okay.
ferry. So yeah, it was nice.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
It
But
really
again,
sounds like a Indiana Jones movie. That's amazing. Yeah, you
yeah,
were.
but again, I feel like if I would have tried it by myself, people would have probably just told me no. But nobody ever says no to Courtney.
It was your magic trick then.
Yeah.
Wow. So you got to hitchhike the ferry to, well, the truck going on the ferry to Morocco, and then you were finally in Africa. How were
Yeah.
your first days in Africa?
So the first days were honestly, the first weeks were very
Yeah.
relaxed because as we got to Morocco, we saw this same bright yellow van that,
Mm,
Moritz was driving in the harbor. So we walked over and it was Moritz. And he was like, "Oh, yeah, I'm traveling around Morocco for a few weeks before going back up to Europe." Uh, and we ended up spending like the first 3 weeks together with him as he was, just driving us around like a personal driver. Courtney in the front seat, me laying in the back in his bed. And yeah, we just spent like 2 or 3 weeks with the three of us exploring Morocco. And, it was definitely easy because you just wake up and you want to drive somewhere and you just start the car and drive and you don't need to walk to the road first and wait for a car to stop and all this. So yeah, the first few weeks were very, very relaxed.
okay. And then I mean, you crossed all the countries on the west coast of Africa. I think that, I mean, it would be really interesting to talk about each of them, but sadly, I don't think we will have time. It will be long for you. Starting from Mauritania, what would be the most challenging countries that you had?
Um, so Mauritania was pretty easy because it's a lot of desert.
Yeah.
It's basically just one road going like down the
Okay.
country and then one road coming from inland. Um, so if you get picked up by someone, they're most likely going in the same direction as you because there's nowhere else to go.
Okay.
And they're most likely not going to stop until they get to one of the two big cities because there's nothing in between.
Hmm. Okay.
Um, so, the road might be quiet. So you might wait a while before somebody stops. But then once somebody stops, they can probably take you like 5, 6 hours. Um, Guinea was probably one of the most challenging just
Okay.
because they have such a bad road, bad infrastructure,
Okay.
a lot of corrupt police checkpoints, which, to be fair, they never really bothered us too much, but they would bother our drivers and, just make up the most random rules and all
Mm.
this. Lovely people, though. Lovely, lovely people. But yeah, it's one of the poorest countries. They have some bad um, colonial, yeah, past. Basically, what happened was Guinea voted for their own independence 2 years before France was going to give it to them in
Mm.
1958. And then they also opted for their own currency rather than, what they use in most of Western Africa, which is the Central African franc, or the CFA, what they call it. Um, and yeah, France on their way out just made sure to destroy all the infrastructure. They made sure to completely ruin their currency. Um,
Okay. Yeah.
yeah, and they're still really struggling with that. And now, they have, yeah, not the greatest government. They have places with electricity for like 3 hours a day, and that's just standard. That's just their life because they pay their electricity bills, but then the government, who gets their electricity from a Turkish ship just off the coast, doesn't pay the
Mm.
money to the Turkish ship, but just pockets it himself.
Okay. Yeah.
And then, yeah, they just get power cuts all the time. And that's just standard life there.
Okay. Yeah. So I guess it was also kind of a cultural shock to experience all of this.
Yeah, yeah. And the road's terrible. I think there was one day we got picked up by a truck on his way to Conakry,
Yeah.
and it was about 200 kilometers.
Yeah.
It took us 12 hours in this fully loaded truck,
Okay. Yeah.
which, yeah, is not very fast, just terrible roads. But then, again, like the Guinean people, so kind. So after 12 hours, we get there to Conakry. And this driver must have been exhausted. He must have, just wanted to go home and see his family too. But then we still had about half an hour to go to our destination.
Yeah.
So our driver called up his uncle, who came and met us on the outskirts of Guinea. Um, his uncle dropped off a bike. Our driver that already drove us 12 hours got on the bike, told both of us to get on the back with our backpacks. Um, and then this guy just drove us half an hour through the traffic in Conakry straight to our accommodation
Wow.
just because, he's friendly.
Yeah. I mean, this is amazing to hear such stories. And I want to ask you about the hitchhiking culture in Africa. I mean, I mean how people react when they see you that you needing a ride. Are they
Um,
always friendly like this? How how are they in general? And I mean, you
yeah.
said in Africa, but if you can say that if there are differences between the north, the south, as you've been to so many
Um,
countries.
so a lot of people, yeah, almost everybody has been friendly. But what does happen quite a lot is, especially in countries like Guinea, if you have a car, you like not everybody can afford a car.
Hmm.
So when you have a car, it's very common for you to stop for people on the side of the road needing a lift,
Okay.
and then you drive them, and then they give you some money towards petrol or something.
Hmm.
Which has caused some confusion in the past. So
Okay.
we straight away explain what we're doing, which doesn't always work, again, due to our very limited French. But yeah, no, most of the times, people actually will go out of their way to help us. It happens so many times that people will try to drive you to like, a bus station or like a shared
Hmm.
taxi service, whatever,
Yeah.
to where you want to go. And then you explain to them like, no, that's not what we're trying to do. And then you try to explain the concept of hitchhiking. And then they just look at you and they go, but don't worry, I'll pay for your ticket. That's fine.
Wow.
And then you keep having to explain like, no, that's
You hitchhike. Yeah.
yeah, we don't need that. But yeah, it happens so many times where people that have nothing still
Hmm.
offer to just buy you a ticket or whatever.
Hmm.
Um yeah, it's cool to see.
Yeah. I mean, maybe it's we'll go a bit out of the trip, but meeting such people, how did it impact you? How did it impact your way of seeing the world, seeing people?
It just makes you realize that, no matter where you go, people are good.
Yeah.
And it also makes you realize that everybody, I don't, how do you say this? Like everybody just lives their life and
Hmm.
there is some evil people, but most people just, yeah.
Hmm.
And even if people try to, scam you or people try to rob you, whatever, like everybody's going through their own things. So let's
Hmm.
say you get robbed, like you don't know, maybe that guy that just took $50 from you needs that money to put his grandma to the hospital, take his grandma to the hospital or whatever.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you get more knowledge about the complexity of everybody's life, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay. And actually, you just talked about scam or any. Did you get like bad situations with people, get scammed or robbed?
Um, robbed. Well, there was this one time where like some kids tried to steal my phone.
Okay.
So it was like, leaning against a tree, filming myself as I was trying to
Hmm.
hitchhike.
Okay.
Um, and then I see these kids across the road and they kind of just looking sketchy.
Mm.
And then one of them gets like sent over to me. And as he's walking over, I like quickly grab my phone. And as I do that, you see him like turning around, looking at his mates, like confused as to what to do now, because he was just gonna grab it and
Okay.
run. And then they like kind of, push it forward. So he walks over, and then you just see him like think for a second, and he goes, "Oh, can I borrow your phone to call my mom?" And I just looked at him,
Mm.
and I was like laughing. I was like, "No, mate, not gonna happen." So then he walks back over to his friends, and then a few minutes later, all five of them come towards me.
Yeah.
And I know they're only little kids, but like, I don't know what they're gonna do. So I just literally
Mm.
ran away and hid inside the shop for a while.
Okay.
Um, and that was in Barcelona.
Okay. Barcelona. Man, this is so crazy because once leaving Barcelona too, I was on the petrol station out of Barcelona going south. I saw like I think it was a couple of I think they actually were from the Netherlands. I just asked them
Yeah.
for a ride and I kept on hanging out in the petrol station and then I see another car. Like there is this guy who is running while getting into his car on the passenger seat the car starts to drive away and then I see the woman who just rejected my request running after the car and just throwing her water bottle to the car and I think they just got robbed too, so it's crazy. Also in Barcelona.
Yeah.
Okay. Spain
Um,
again.
yeah, I know. But then, once you get to Africa, like I said, it's usually the opposite,
Yeah,
where people try to give you money.
yeah,
People
this
like
is
to, yeah. Um,
crazy.
and even with like the police checkpoints, we've heard a lot of bad things beforehand about all these. There's so many police checkpoints along the way, which are meant to be
Hmm.
there for safety. But a lot of times they just try to get money out of drivers.
Hmm.
And especially the people I spoke to beforehand, people that, overland Africa themselves that drive through it. They have a
Yeah.
lot of bad experiences because they will get stopped at a police checkpoint. And basically what happens is these people show up in cars, like, a brand new Toyota Land Cruiser, fully decked out with like the rooftop tent and everything. And these cars will cost more than the homes that these police officers
Hmm.
live in. So
Yeah,
when they see them, obviously they think, oh,
they
here's
should try
some
something.
rich tourist. Let me try to get some money out of this.
Yeah,
But when they saw us, it was usually the opposite.
yeah, the
A
more
lot of times
generous
they
kind.
didn't even, yeah, well, a lot of times they didn't even notice us because we would be, in the back seat of a local car. So they
Hmm.
recognized the car and just straight away let us past. Um, but we've been, dropped off at these checkpoints a few times where we would be standing there trying to get a ride. And then a lot of times they would just be like, oh, don't worry, we'll help. And they literally just
Okay.
tell you, oh, go take a seat in the shade. You sit down. And then as you're waiting, they just stop every car and they ask every car, oh, can you take these people?
And did they ever get you some rides?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, yeah, all the time. Um, but, I wasn't always sure if they really explained what we were doing or
Yeah.
if they just told drivers, oh, you need to take these people. Um,
Okay.
but either way, yeah, it worked. It worked brilliantly. And
Different.
yeah.
Okay.
Um, and yeah, that happened the whole way through.
Hmm. Okay, that's really nice to hear. And I mean I wanted to ask about like so you had these encounters with the police and you had also well of course many encounters. Do you have moments where when you spent a lot of time with someone or do you want to share any encounters that really felt important to
Like
you?
like the hitchhiking ones. Um,
Yeah. I mean, the
there was
host
this
can be
one,
interesting too.
yeah. I mean, there was this one guy that took me through the Sahara, which was just he was amazing. So he picked me up and he was driving all the way to Dakhla, which was like 850 kilometers or something. I think it's the longest ride. I've had. And, it's already quite late in the morning, so we kind of needed to get a move on. But this guy just did not seem to care at all. He just
Mm.
turned into my personal tour guide. Um, and he stopped at every single thing he thought I might find interesting along the way.
Okay.
And we had a great time together. At one point, he like pulled over next to the coast, and he led me down these stairs going down the side of the cliff. And then at the bottom of the cliff, there was a boat, and he chartered the boat. And it was like a small boat, but we took the boat out away from the coast a bit to
Okay.
see like hundreds of flamingos.
Okay.
And I just met this guy like, that morning. And there I was with him in the middle, of the Sahara next to the coast looking at flamingos.
Yeah, seems surreal.
And then it got to, the sun went down. It was still Ramadan. So after the sun went down, he could eat again. So we pulled over somewhere, had a whole feast. And then I thought he was going all the way to Dakhla, but about an hour and a half before Dakhla, he pulled over in the middle of nowhere at this windmill farm. Like, the big electricity windmills.
Yeah.
And he explains like, oh, this is where I work. And I'm like, oh, okay. It was already like, I think 11 p.m. at this point.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, no worries. Like, obviously, you need to get to work. You need to start work early tomorrow morning. So I'll just put on my tent somewhere and I'll just hitchhike the last bit tomorrow. And he's like, no, no, no. I told you I'll take you to Dakhla. I just need to say hi to some friends, say hi to some colleagues, whatever. And then a few minutes later, he insisted on driving me, the last hour and a half to Dakhla, dropped me off there well after midnight. And then he still needed to drive an hour and a half back. And he was working at like 4 a.m. the next morning. Um, so he pretty much just gave up his few hours of sleep
For
just to
you.
help me
Wow.
after, already taking me hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of kilometers.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was pretty cool. And because I did the first bit of Morocco with Moritz, that was kind of my first time, or one of my first times really hitchhiking in
Mm.
Africa. And
Yeah.
then, it started off so great that I was like, oh, this could be fun.
Yeah. This is an amazing first impression.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. I was while you were talking, I was sometimes expecting that maybe he would host you. I mean, I had the experience of having a sunset car while going to Marrakesh, and I was so therefore curious about hospitality in the countries you've crossed. Have you ever been invited by your drivers
Yeah.
to sleep for
Yeah.
night?
Yeah.
Did it happen often?
Yeah. A fair few times. We accepted a few, we've rejected a few because,
Yeah,
sometimes after days and days and days on the road, you just want some kind of privacy and just
yeah.
relax. And but yeah, the times we have accepted, they usually been really nice. There was this one we met this lady Maria in Mauritania, and she invited us into her home. And then we got there, and her home was literally just one room, probably the size of whichever room you're in right now,
Okay, yeah.
um, with no furniture or nothing, just a room. Uh, and it was so incredibly hot inside. There was no electricity. Electricity wasn't working.
Okay.
And it was too hot inside. And it was her and her mom and her like three younger brothers and sisters. It was too hot inside. So we ended up sleeping outside. They'd like dragged the carpet out and we just slept under the stars. We got eaten alive by mosquitoes. So we ended up putting up our tent, sleeping in that instead. Yeah, it was a rough night, but it was nice. And again, people have nothing, like, and are still just willing to share it all. And that's,
Hmm.
yeah, I don't think you really see that much at home. I feel like, the more you have, the more people are afraid to lose.
Hmm.
Whereas there, people have nothing and they're willing to give you everything.
Yeah, that seems to be one of the like biggest lesson you got from your trip. And right now I'm thinking that I should meditate on this because it sounds so true. And yeah, it's led to such amazing moments then. And yeah, that's really
Yeah.
great. So, but we've been there and back from Guinea to Mauritania. Let's let you move forward in your trip. Um, I remember that when I was following your adventures, you had like some kind of injury to the foot, like, and you were still moving forward. I was like, oh, what is going to happen to this man? Maybe you want maybe to talk about how you manage this because maybe it's I think it's a bit subject like the health problem we could have while traveling. It's
Yeah.
it can be so scary. How did you manage it?
Yeah. So basically, at one point, my shoes got absolutely drenched and they smelled
Yeah.
horrible and they were falling apart and everything. So I just decided to throw them out and I was like, I'll just continue on flip-flops for now till I can, buy some shoes somewhere.
Okay.
Um, and I was walking around in flip-flops and I must have gotten like some small cuts on my feet or something.
Mm.
And then those cuts got infected. Um, and the infection just kind of slowly got worse and worse every single
Yeah.
day. So because I was looking at it every single day, it didn't feel like it was that bad. You just look at it and you're like, oh, it looks pretty much the same as yesterday. Um, but yeah, it got pretty bad, and it got to a point where
Mm.
like I couldn't really walk anymore. Just like too painful. So yeah, that wasn't great. But you kind of just suck it up and carry on. And then it wasn't until a few weeks in that I decided to get some uh,
Yeah.
antibiotics. But then at that point, it's already starting to get better anyways. And
Mm.
yeah, then it slowly healed. But what was definitely worse than that was getting malaria in
Oh
Benin.
yeah.
Yeah. So that wasn't great. And I probably already had it for a while before I realized I had it because it was already
Okay.
feeling pretty bad for days or weeks ahead of
Yeah.
time. But then after you have it, you take these pills called Cortem. So you take Cortem twice a day for 3 days. And during that time, you feel really, really, really rough because
Mm.
it's a pretty intense medication with a lot of negative side effects as well.
Mm.
So, you're at like the peak of malaria. And then on top of that, you also just have these side effects from these pills.
Mm.
But then once you finish those 3 days, um, you actually start to feel a lot better really, really
Okay.
quickly. So, for 3 days, you're just laying in bed and like hallucinating and like cold sweats and everything. But then
Mm.
afterwards, I felt better than I had in like months. Like
Okay.
I really needed some rest.
I can
So yeah, it
imagine.
was probably like it sucked to have it, but I probably needed like, a bit of a reset.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I guess it
yeah,
was mostly some kind of forced uncomfortable break in your trip, but then
yeah,
you started again. And so yeah, so you were in Benin for the whole malaria
yeah.
moment. And
So yeah, to be honest, my timing was perfect. So I tested
yeah.
positive, and at that point, we just found out we needed to spend about a week waiting for our Nigerian visas, anyways.
Okay.
So we couldn't leave the city; like we were stuck there, anyways. Um, so it was perfect timing to spend a week in bed. But then a few weeks later, right as we were on the move again, and right as we got to a point where like we couldn't stop because we needed to be like here one day, here the next day, Courtney got malaria. Um, so for her, it was definitely so much worse because, where I could just stay in bed, she had to like hitchhike and get on boats and
Mm.
all that stuff.
Yeah. So that was, yeah, even like double double time period for your team to have Malaya.
Yeah.
And but you still hitchhiked a bit with Malaya then, like
No,
despite
no.
having
So
it?
for me,
No. Yeah.
no, I like,
Okay.
yeah, it was pretty much over by the time we left
Okay.
Benin, which was nice. Yeah.
And how was this then, well, eventually you then healed and you started to really go down to direction of South Africa. I
Uh-huh.
actually didn't really follow this part of your trip on Instagram. I was not really on social media at this moment. Were there any specific moments that you like to share about this part of the trip?
Um, there was this one time where we wanted to go from Nigeria to Cameroon. And basically, there's a couple of land border crossings, but none of them are really ideal.
Mm.
There's one that goes through a bit of a civil war conflict area. And then the one further up north has very, very bad roads, especially in the rainy
Mm.
season. So you can spend like days and days and days and get stuck and everything. So we opted for the other option, which is to take like this small boat
Yeah.
along the coast. And, this is like a boat the size of the sofa.
On the couch, yeah.
Yeah, like it's not very big. And basically, it's mainly used to transport goods. So we got to the
Okay.
coast. It's like fully loaded with car parts. And then we kind of got told to, sit on top of that and try to get comfortable. Um, so we're on top of that boat, holding on for our lives. And we were meant to meet some people in Cameroon. Some people we
Okay.
met, friends of friends, Europeans who volunteer at a wildlife sanctuary there. So we were meant to meet them, and the last message we sent to them was, "We're going on the boat now." And then they didn't hear from us
Okay.
for like almost a day because what happened was it's meant to be like a 3-4 hour boat ride, but after about an hour and a half, the boat just stops working, and we're just floating around in the ocean. And eventually, after a few minutes, the guy managed to get the boat working again, but it would only go very slow. So we make our way to the coast to this random fisherman's village, like in between the two countries, pretty much. Not connected to the mainland by any roads or anything, just like few houses along the coast. Um, and they definitely haven't seen foreigners there. Like we were definitely, like, we're definitely the first ones there. So for like the 4 hours that they're trying to fix this boat, the whole town is just stood there staring at us. Um, but again, everybody really nice. But then once we get the boat fixed, I was really happy. I was like, let's go to Cameroon. And our captain just goes, "Oh no, we can't go now because it's 5 p.m. The sun is about to go down. And at night, there are pirates on these waters. And I don't want to lose my boat," which, fair enough. Um, but then because of that, we were stuck in this little village with nowhere to go. We didn't have any cash left anymore because we were just going to get some cash once we got to Cameroon. Um, so we had no cash, no food, no water, nowhere to sleep. And then the guy that fixed our boat, Ibrahim, the mechanic,
Mhm.
he invited us into his home. So he put our tent up inside his house, spent the night there. And then the one other passenger, Kingsley, he bought us some pasta, which we made in Ibrahim's house. We paid him back for it later. We like to send him money online, but that doesn't really matter. And then yeah, the next morning we wake up early. We go to to Cameroon, and we get there, and it turns out that our friends were about to they were setting up a rescue mission to come and find us
Wow.
because the last thing they heard from us was we're getting on the boat now, and then
Mm.
nothing, and there was no surface there or anything. And as they were waiting, and getting worried, they called the Cameroonian border control post because they were like, oh, maybe they came ashore and they went somewhere else instead. So they contact these guys and they go, oh no, we haven't seen any foreigners come ashore today. So the only information they have is us saying we're going on the boat, and then the Cameroonian side saying, oh no, they never arrived. So they thought, we had drowned or been kidnapped or something. And yeah, they were literally very, very worried when all of a sudden we arrived and we were like, oh, hey guys, we're fine. So we were never really in any danger, but, because the boat wasn't sinking or anything, we just were floating around. But
Mm.
people definitely thought we were in danger. And it is,
Yeah.
good to know that if something like that, like if something bad would have happened, like we had people looking out for us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds like a story worthy of a movie. I mean, I can imagine having in one hand you on the boat, on the other hand people starting the rescue mission, and
Yeah.
in the end having everything going fine is just amazing.
Yeah.
And I think that's it. Right now we are getting really closer to South Africa. Maybe we should. I mean, before asking about South Africa, I was curious about just all the borders. How how hard was it to get the visas? Because I feel like you were improvising everything. Did
Um,
you? Yeah. How did you
no, so I
manage?
did I did some research beforehand, about where
Okay.
to get certain visas.
Okay.
Um, and it actually ended up being surprisingly easy. A lot of them are, you don't need a visa, it's e-visas, and then some of them you need to actually go to embassies to apply for the
Mm.
visa. Um, and the only one that was really a bit of a challenge was the Nigerian one because
Okay.
they officially you need to get it in the country where you live. So I would have to apply for the Nigerian visa in the embassy in the Netherlands. But in the country before that, Benin, you can buy like a temporary residency card, which sounded dodgy, but apparently it's like a legit thing. So you can buy this residency card saying like, I live in Benin for 6 months. And then you get this card and then you use that to apply for your visa. Um, and yeah, we did that. But then you get to the embassy and this guy was asking for like a 40 euros service fee. Um,
Okay.
but basically we've read about it online and this service fee, it's definitely just a bribe, but it's been in place for so many years now
Okay.
that and everybody pays it. And if you don't pay it, he just doesn't give you the visa. Um, so there's nothing you can do about it, unfortunately. Um, but yeah, I think that was the only bribe we had to pay in the whole journey. And this,
Mm.
even though it was a bribe, it felt so official almost. Like it wasn't the first time and it was always the same amount. And I don't know.
Yeah.
Um, but then I think, for people traveling Africa, the hardest part is to get your car across each border and to get your car insurance everywhere and like
Mm.
temporary import tax and all this stuff. Whereas we didn't have any of that.
Yeah. So
Uh,
as a
and
hitchhiker, it would
because,
be a bit easier.
yeah, definitely. Like we definitely crossing the borders was a lot easier and a lot faster than doing it on the car would have been.
Okay. And I guess that you told earlier about a friend who was biking like with his bicycle going to Africa. So I guess it was also easy for him. So
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
yeah. So if people want to use bicycle to go to Africa, please do. It's possible. Okay.
yeah, definitely.
Uh, I think that I mean we could. I think that you could talk for days about all your adventures, but I think that I th yeah, we don't have that much time remaining. Maybe we should switch to the moment where you finally get to South Africa. How did you feel?
Strange. I
Yeah.
I thought it was gonna be, like this big moment. Um, but then we got picked up by this guy, Wimpy, and Wimpy drove us from the last bit in Namibia to the border and then actually across the border. Um, and that was just that. So we were just in the car at the border, and he like got most of our documents sorted. Really easy border crossing. And before we knew it, we just drove into South Africa, and that was it. And I don't really know, but in our head, we like built this up to be, like this big moment, and then we just drove across, and we were just looking at each other like, oh, I guess, I guess that's that. Um, and then once we got to South Africa, honestly, like we were living like kings. So I've been posting about this journey online, and quite a big chunk of my following is from South Africa.
Hmm.
So there were so many people that, would message us, inviting us to come stay at the
Okay.
house, or eat at their restaurants, everything. So we were living the good life, living in luxury. And throughout the trip, I lost about 15 kilos.
Okay.
Um, and then once we got to Namibia and South Africa, to be fair, I gained
You
it
got
all
them
back
back.
again. Yeah.
Well, that's pretty amazing. Actually, now that you talk about your experience with social media, your social media bring you all these contacts in South Africa. How did it impact maybe the whole trip? Maybe, I mean, you
Um,
were really posting daily. I guess it had
yeah.
also a huge impact on your schedule.
Not too much, no. So,
Okay.
the videos post daily, but they were like 4 days behind.
Okay.
So I had, sometime I didn't need to edit a video every single day. I could just
Mm.
do a couple every few days. So like
Okay. Yeah.
every other day I would do two, or sometimes wait 3 days. Um, and because you make like this 1.5 minute video
Mm.
every single day for 294 days, you actually get surprisingly quick and efficient at it. So towards the end, I was able to, make them so quickly that, yeah, it really wasn't that big a deal.
Okay.
Um, but, having to film everything, that was definitely a bit strange, because I remember coming home and I was having dinner at night, and I didn't film the dinner,
Mm.
which felt really strange because it felt like something, that I did every single day for the past 10 months.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, that was definitely a bit weird, like not having to film everything. Like I can walk to my friend's house and not get like,
Not
this,
recall everything. Yeah.
get like this few seconds of me walking and
Mm.
all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that as now you are talking about getting home, I wanted yeah, to talk about some other topics, but I mean, first, how did it feel to get home after all this time on the road? How did you
Again,
how did you adapt?
very, very, very surreal.
Yeah.
I mean, I moved in with my mom again. Um, and out of the past, I was home for 10 days in 2023. And then before that, I left home in September 2021. It's the last time I was home before that. So I haven't spent much time at home at all in like the past 3 years, basically. So yeah, it's very surreal to be back again. And now
Hmm.
like I went away to England again for like a week over New Year's.
Yeah.
But I was home for 4 weeks in December. And that's the longest I've been at home since 2021,
Okay.
which
Yeah.
is, it's crazy to think about. And it still doesn't feel real. Like I still struggle with putting my clothes away in my wardrobe because it
Hmm.
feels like they should go in the backpack.
Yeah, I understand this. I think
Yeah.
that yeah, I I see the time we have now. I mean, I think that we are really done with the storytelling part, but now I want to ask you about more like maybe relationships, whether about relationship with your family, with friends, and with people you meet on the road, because it's so much stuff we have to manage while being while traveling, and I mean, it's a really big question, but how do you keep contact with the people who are, I mean, the friends and family you have back home?
It's hard. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
difficult. But you have WhatsApp and all this stuff, so it's it's definitely a lot easier than it would have been 20, 30 years ago. Um,
mm,
but then yeah, because of that, sometimes you forget. Like sometimes you just living the moment in Africa and you forget that
yeah,
there's people at home and you just go weeks or months without
mm,
messaging them. But then again, the videos probably help. So like even though
yeah,
I'm not speaking to all my friends and family directly, they still know what I've been up to.
mm.
Um, which again is also very strange because you come home and normally after the trip you have all these stories to tell, but
They know
now
everything already.
they know everything. Yeah, so that's quite a strange feeling.
Yeah,
But yeah, you try your best to keep in contact with everyone.
mm,
And yeah, sometimes it doesn't always work. And yeah, that's just life. But then again,
yeah,
like you could be at home, and also go a few weeks without speaking to certain friends. And that's something I find as well. Like it's easier to be alone, to like not speak to your family when you're so far away from them anyways. Whereas I feel like, there's people living their lives at home that also go a week without speaking to any of their friends,
mm,
which would probably be a lot harder because, you know they're right there. So you're like, why am I not speaking to them?
mm.
Whereas for me, it almost feels like it gives you an excuse. You're like, oh, it's okay to be alone for now.
It's a really interesting perspective, I think. And I guess it's, I mean, you talked about also being alone. I mean, you were not, you were almost always with people during this trip
Yeah,
from Southampton to South Africa. I mean,
very
I
true.
think we should maybe talk about it. I mean, I would want to ask you about maybe like well, how it was to have a travel partner for all this time, and maybe after to talk about how maybe traveling, your whole experience did build you as a person. But maybe before we get to this part, I just had the Zoom telling me that we have 10 minutes left.
Yeah.
Should we start a new reunion so we are sure to have time, or stay on this one? And I mean, it depends
Yeah,
on
either or.
how much things you have to say about it.
I could
Because
probably make it work. Let's give it a
yeah,
go.
okay. And then I will have a few quick last questions. So let's go. I'm listening.
Yeah, so it was meant to be a solo trip, and then 25 days in, I met Courtney, and I managed to convince her to come with me all the way, which 1000% changed the trip. I think it would have been a lot more lonely without her because, especially because I don't speak the local language a lot of times. So
Mm,
it's hard to communicate on like a deeper level with locals. You just have, the basic questions like, hey, how are you?
mm.
Where are you from? How's your day going? This, that. Um, so it's definitely cool to, have someone there to really talk to about the whole trip. And it's also someone that has gone through the same thing that I have. So it's someone, to now look back at it with and you like there's only one other person in the world that knows what this trip was like, and that's Courtney.
Mm,
So it's really cool now to, have someone to talk to about this trip because friends and family at home, they're lovely, but
mm.
they've never done anything like this. They don't know what it's like. Whereas, at least now I have someone to talk to about that.
Yeah, I can imagine that's great to have someone to that you can talk with about all this experience because it's so unique that, yeah, as you said, she's the only one that can understand the whole thing. And I mean, I as we don't have a lot of time remaining, I will rush a bit the questions. Um, I'm curious. I when I as I see you, you seem to be like a really joyful person, really easygoing, really like kind of extrovert and good with people. Was it always the case for you? And yeah, and also like how did traveling impact your way of being?
Um, no, when I was growing up, I was definitely a lot more shy. Um, Definitely a lot more to myself, a lot more introvert.
Mm,
But
mm,
once you start traveling, you just, especially, when you're traveling in like hostels, you realize that everybody
mm,
else there is in the same boat as you. So you can be sat in a common room by yourself and you're, worried about having to talk to other people, having to like make that first step. But the other people in the room are probably thinking the exact same thing. And once you realize that, you're like, screw it, I'm just going to go over. And that's probably the other good thing about traveling. Like, let's say it doesn't work out, it doesn't matter because you're traveling, you're just going somewhere else. Um, which definitely makes it, a lot easier to approach people. And it's the
for
same
sure.
with hitchhiking, even. A lot of times people will share like really intimate stuff with you or like, details about their life that they wouldn't normally talk about to people because they know that the second they will drop you off, you're probably never going to see them again. So they don't mind sharing a lot of personal things with you.
Mm. Well, this seems like to be a good invitation to traveling. Maybe if you had like three short advice you'd like to give to people who'd like to try hitchhiking, what would you tell them?
Um, be patient. You're the one that decides to do this, and 99.9% of the cars, depending on where you are, won't stop for you. So when you see a car, don't expect it to stop. It probably won't. But know that no matter what, if you're determined enough, eventually someone will stop, someone will pick you up. Um, Make sure you find a good spot. A good spot is somewhere where drivers have enough time to see you, but also are going slow enough and have somewhere safe to pull over. Um, the slower, the better. Speed bumps, anything like that, potholes, anywhere where drivers go slow. Good spot to stand. Um, Smile. You don't always need a sign. A sign helps, but it's not necessary. All you need is a thumb. Just put it
Mhm.
up, smile. And don't be afraid to try it. Like it's so easy to look at a trip like mine and think, oh, I don't want to do anything like that, or I don't think I could. But don't start with, something as crazy as hitchhiking to South Africa. Just try to hitchhike to uni the next time you're going there. Try to hitchhike to your grandma, see how it goes, and you'll probably have a great time and then want to do it again and again. And before you know it, it escalates.
Yeah, ended up hitchhiking Japan, then then from South Hampton to South Africa. I think
Yeah.
that we can. I mean, I can now ask you the signature question of this like these interviews. I If you could give your definition of the word adventure, a short definition of this word, what would it be for you?
Um, Discomfort, going doing something you wouldn't normally do, doing something extraordinary, and then yet when doing it, finding the beauty in it and appreciating it all, no matter how bad it gets, and knowing that there's no such thing as a bad adventure. um, if it's not a good adventure, it will be a good story.
Yeah,
And
sounds pretty good.
yeah.
Yeah, I feel like it's quite universal, and you could actually live one any day. So I really like your definition. Well, I see that we have just 2 minutes remaining. I
Okay,
think
okay.
that now I'd like maybe if you have anything, any next adventures to share, any social medias, maybe now is the time so people can keep on following what you do. What are your next
Uh,
projects?
I honestly, I don't really know yet. I want to travel again, that's for sure. And I'm currently working on a book as well about my journey across Africa. So the plan is to write that book and then figure out where to go from there, plan the next adventure, and go on the road again. But where to or when, I don't know yet.
Okay. Well, I will leave the link of your Instagram so people can follow you and be updated about the book then. I think
Thank you.
you must have so many other stories to share in it. Well, Timo, it was really a pleasure to have you here. And I mean, can't wait to read your book then. So, yeah, if you
Cool.
want maybe to have a last word before leaving the interview, maybe a quote that inspires you.
Uh, Live life in the moment. Don't worry too much about later because you don't know if later will ever come.
Hmm.
Don't live for retirement because you might not, ever get to that age. Live life now, enjoy life to the fullest,
Yeah.
and live every day as if it was your last.
Perfect philosophy for Hitchhiker, I think. Well, Timo, thanks you a lot for your time, and well, can't wait to follow your next adventures. It was really
Thank
nice
you so
to
much.
talk with you today.
Cool. Thank you for having me.